to stand before the threshold of death is not to face a wall, but to encounter a mirror that has been veiled by the heavy velvet of our own choosing. We have walked through the marketplace of human existence for so long, draped in the garments of name, form, and history, that we have come to believe the great transition is a terrifying leap into a dark, chartless ocean. Yet, what if the darkness we fear is merely the shadow cast by our own averted eyes? What if the great mystery of the afterlife is not a secret guarded by silent gods, but a vivid, crystalline memory that we have strategically tucked away in the deepest folds of our being, so that we might play the game of life with absolute sincerity? This exploration invites you to reconsider the nature of your end as a profound act of homecoming, a return to a state of being that is as familiar as the rhythm of your own breath, yet hidden by a voluntary amnesia that serves a cosmic and practical purpose. The significance of this realization cannot be overstated, for it shifts the very foundation of how we inhabit the present moment. In our modern culture, we treat death as a catastrophic interruption, a thief that comes in the night to steal the harvest of our years. We build entire civilizations on the shivering foundation of mortality salience, distracting ourselves with the frantic accumulation of shadows. But if death is actually a memory, a destination we have visited countless times before and will return to with the ease of a traveler reaching their native shore, then the existential panic that drives the Matrix begins to dissolve. We move from the frantic energy of the hunted to the serene curiosity of the observer. We begin to understand that we did not come here to find the light, but to see what the light looks like when it is filtered through the stained glass of limitation, time, and biological fragility. Metaphorically, we are like actors who have become so immersed in our roles that we have forgotten the existence of the backstage, the director, and the world outside the theater. We have practiced our lines and donned our costumes with such fervor that we truly believe the wooden floorboards of the stage are the only ground that has ever existed. The secret of death is simply the memory of the dressing room, the recollection of the silence that exists before the curtains rise and after they fall. We chose to forget this memory so that our performance on the stage of Earth would be authentic. After all, what weight would a tragedy hold if the actor knew the blood was merely paint? What value would a triumph have if the hero remembered they were immortal and untouchable? The forgetting is the technology of immersion. It is the save game feature that allows us to experience the stakes of the physical world with a heart that can truly break and a soul that can truly yearn. On a cosmic dimension, this voluntary amnesia suggests a hidden architecture to the universe, a divine geometry where the void is actually a plenitude. We often perceive the state beyond life as an absence, a cold vacuum where the self is extinguished. However, if we listen to the whispers of the marrow and the quiet pulses of our intuition, we find a different narrative. The state we call death is actually the baseline of our existence. It is the vast, luminous ocean of consciousness from which we emerged like temporary waves. We are not humans having a spiritual experience, nor are we spirits having a human experience. We are the infinite itself, pretending to be small for the sheer, breathtaking adventure of it. Death is merely the moment the wave remembers it is the sea. It is the dissolution of the illusion of the droplet, a process that feels like an ending only to those who have forgotten the vastness of the water. This unveiling of hidden layers of reality requires us to look at the flicker of our existence. If you sit in absolute stillness and observe the gap between your thoughts, or the momentary silence between the inhalation and the exhalation, you are catching a glimpse of the memory you chose to forget. That stillness is not nothing. It is a vibrant, intelligent, and deeply familiar presence. It is the I am that exists before the I am a teacher, I am a parent, or I am a citizen. This presence is the traveler who stands at the gate of every birth and every death, smiling at the perceived drama because they know the ending has already been written in the ink of eternity. To remember death is to recognize this presence as your true home and to realize that the transition we fear is simply the act of waking up from a particularly vivid dream. Practically, this perspective offers a revolutionary form of liberation. When the end is no longer a monster under the bed, but a well-loved book on the shelf, our relationship with risk, love, and purpose is fundamentally transformed. We stop living in the waiting room of the future and begin to inhabit the temple of the now. We realize that the purpose of our time here is not to avoid the inevitable return, but to experience the unique textures of this temporary amnesia. We are here to taste the salt of tears, the heat of passion, and the density of stone, experiences that are impossible in the weightless, transparent realm of our origin. Death is the frame that gives the painting of life its value. By remembering the frame, we can finally appreciate the art without the paralyzing fear that the canvas is all there is. As we stand at the threshold of this multi-part journey, I invite you to feel the resonance of this truth in your own body. Does the idea of death as a memory feel like a relief or a challenge? Does it stir a distant, ancient recognition in your cells? We are peeling back the velvet curtain, moving past the definitions of biology and the dogmas of religion to encounter the raw, radiant fact of our own continuity. We are reclaiming the lost gospel of the return, recognizing that the shore we are sailing toward is the same shore from which we once launched our small, brave vessels. The mystery is over, and the memory is beginning to stir. To understand why the transition of death remains a shrouded memory, we must first examine the pillar of voluntary immersion, the primary concept that defines our terrestrial experience. In the vast holographic library of the soul, information is not something we acquire, it is something we inhabit. When we choose to enter the physical plane, we enter into a sacred contract of forgetting. This is not a punishment or a flaw in the design of the universe, but a necessary mechanical requirement for the depth of human emotion. If we walked through life with a constant, lucid awareness of our eternal nature, remembering the luminous landscapes of the between lives and the indestructible fabric of our being, the gravity of our choices on earth would be lost. The stakes would vanish. To truly feel the weight of a hand held in the dark, or the searing beauty of a sunset that will never be repeated in exactly the same way, we must believe for a time that this moment is all there is. The core theme is that ignorance is the catalyst for authenticity. By forgetting the secret, we allow the soul to be truly surprised, moved, and transformed by the theater of the mundane. Intertwined with this immersion is the concept of the crystalline blueprint of return. Just as a seed carries the memory of the tree it's destined to become, the human consciousness carries the genetic code of the infinite. Every cell in our body is vibrating with a frequency that is in constant communication with the home frequency of the non-physical realm. We often mistake our intuition, our sudden bursts of déjà vu, or our inexplicable yearnings for distant stars as mere psychological quirks. In reality, these are vibrational leaks from the memory we chose to forget. They are the breadcrumbs we left for ourselves before we descended into the density of the flesh. The core concept here is that death is not an external event that happens to us, but an internal activation key that is triggered when the soul's curriculum in this particular form has been completed. It is a biological and spiritual graduation, a return to a state of high-fidelity perception that is always present beneath the static of our daily worries. A third guiding pillar is the theme of the illusion of linear time in the Matrix. We view life as a horizontal line with a definitive beginning and a final end. This linear narrative is the primary engine of our fear. However, the deeper truth revealed by the memory of death is that existence is fundamentally spherical and simultaneous. From the perspective of the eternal self, your birth, your current breath, and your final transition are all happening within a single vast now. Death is not a distant point in the future. It is the other side of the very moment you are inhabiting. It is the breath between the breaths. When we realize that the afterlife is not a place we go to, but a dimension of reality we are already in but have tuned out, the nature of the secret changes. We are like deep-sea divers who have become so focused on the pressure of the water and the task at hand that we have forgotten the boat floating just above the surface. The boat is not coming for us. We are always connected to it by the tether of our own awareness. Furthermore, we must address the law of vibrational resonance. The memory of what happens when we die is not hidden behind a locked door, but behind a frequency barrier. The state of being we call death is a state of extremely high frequency, one of pure light, unconditional love, and total interconnectedness. Because our current human experience is tuned to a lower frequency of survival, competition, and density, we literally cannot see the higher state, just as the human eye cannot see ultraviolet light. This is why the memory feels like a secret. It is not that the information is forbidden. It is that the vessel must be raised to a certain level of resonance to perceive it. Meditation, near-death experiences, and moments of profound mystical awe are all instances where the frequency of the individual momentarily spikes, allowing them to remember the atmosphere of their true home. The core concept is that memory is a function of frequency. To know death is to elevate the heart until it matches the rhythm of the eternal. Finally, we encounter the pillar of the sovereign architect. This concept posits that we are not passive victims of a random biological shutdown, but the authors of our own exit. The memory we chose to forget includes the plan for our own departure, the when, the where, and the how of our return. While the ego self might fight against this idea, the higher self understands that the timing of death is a masterpiece of alignment, serving the evolution of not only our own soul, but the souls of everyone we have touched. When we die, the first thing we remember is that we were the ones who designed the doorway. We realize that we were never lost, never alone, and never in danger. The secret is the ultimate revelation of our own power and our own participation in the divine play. We chose to forget this so that we could experience the thrill of finding our way home against all odds. These core themes reveal that the mystery of death is actually the ultimate Easter egg hidden within the game of life. The themes of voluntary immersion, the crystalline blueprint, the simultaneity of time, the frequency of memory, and the sovereign architect form the foundational logic of our existence. They suggest that the fear of death is simply the last veil to be lifted before we realize that we have been playing in the garden of the infinite all along. By examining these pillars, we begin to see the architecture of the amnesia not as a wall of darkness, but as a masterpiece of design that allows the soul to experience the greatest gift of all, the beauty of a finite moment seen through the eyes of an infinite being. To bridge the gap between abstract concept and felt truth, we must enter the realm of the allegory of the deep-sea diver. Imagine a world of pure, blinding light and infinite weightlessness, where thought is action and separation is unknown. Within this realm, a curious traveler desires to understand the sensation of touch and the thrill of discovery, experiences that are impossible in a place where everything is already known and felt. To achieve this, the traveler dons a heavy, pressurized suit, the human body, and descends into the murky, pressurized depths of a great ocean. As the water grows dark and the pressure increases, the diver's connection to the surface is reduced to a single thin tether of breath. To make the exploration truly meaningful, the diver initiates a memory lock, temporarily forgetting the world of light above. In the dark, the diver finds a single glowing pearl, a moment of love, a creative spark, or a lesson in resilience. The diver believes this pearl is the only light in existence, and their struggle to protect it becomes the most intense, beautiful drama. Death, in this story, is not the shark in the dark, but the moment the memory lock disengages as the diver begins their ascent. The diver does not die. They simply take off the heavy suit and realize they were never truly in the dark, only visiting it to find the pearl. In another corner of this symbolic landscape, we find the parable of the forgotten script. It is said that before every soul is born, it sits in a grand celestial amphitheater and writes a play for the coming lifetime. This script of the return is written with meticulous care, detailing the moments of meeting and the moments of parting. Once the script is finished, the soul hands it to the keeper of the veil and asks to be made to forget every word. The soul then descends to the stage of earth, where it encounters the other actors. When a loved one dies in the play, the soul weeps with a grief so profound it shakes the foundations of its being. It believes the loss is final, the silence eternal. But the secret is that at the end of the play, both actors walk off the stage, hand their costumes to the attendants, and meet in the wings to discuss the performance. They laugh at how well they played their parts, how convincingly they cried, and how perfectly they timed their departures. The grief was the tribute they paid to the realism of the play, and the death was merely the closing of the final act so they could begin to write the next one. Consider the story of the silver compass. Legend tells of a wanderer who carried a small silver compass that always pointed toward a destination called remembrance. The wanderer spent their whole life trying to find this place, trekking across deserts and sailing over frozen seas. They were terrified that if they didn't find remembrance before their time ran out, they would be lost forever in the land of the shadow. As the wanderer grew old and their strength failed, they collapsed on a barren plain, the compass slipping from their fingers. In their final breath, as the memory of the choice returned, they realized that the compass was not pointing toward a distant land, but inward, toward the very center of their own chest. They were already standing in remembrance. The journey across the world was simply the scenery they had chosen to view while they waited for the alarm clock of the soul to ring. The plain was not barren, it was the shore of the return, and the shadow they feared was merely the shade of the great tree under which they had been dreaming the whole time. There is a visceral power in the myth of the alchemical transmutation. In this narrative, the human life is seen as a lead vessel that must be subjected to the fires of experience to create the gold of consciousness. The secret of death is that the vessel must eventually break for the gold to be released. We spend our lives trying to reinforce the lead, patching the cracks and polishing the surface, terrified of the moment the fire becomes too hot. But the break is not a failure. It is the great work reaching its conclusion. The memory we chose to forget is the knowledge that we are the alchemist, not the lead. We chose the fire, we chose the vessel, and we chose the moment of the breaking because we knew that the gold could only be gathered once the lead was cast aside. Death is the final pour, The moment the molten light of the soul is finally free to flow back into the mold of the infinite. Finally, we encounter the allegory of the great library. Imagine an endless library where every book is a life you have lived. When you enter a new life, you check out a book, step into its pages, and become the protagonist. You forget the library exists. You forget you have thousands of other books on the shelves. You become obsessed with the ending of the current volume, fearing the blank pages at the back. But the secret is that what happens when you die is simply the act of closing the book and returning it to the shelf. You stand in the quiet, dust-mote-filled light of the library, look at the spine of the story you just finished, and smile at how well-thumbed the pages have become. Then, you look at the infinite shelves and decide which adventure you would like to forget yourself in next. The library is your home. The books are your vacations. These symbolic narratives serve as refractive lenses, allowing us to see the light of the eternal through the colors of our own imagination. The diver, the actor, the wanderer, the alchemist, and the reader are all versions of you. They remind us that the secret was never a mystery to be solved by the mind, but a memory to be felt by the heart. As we move toward the practical integration of these stories, we carry with us the realization that the end is an old friend wearing a mask, waiting for us to finish the dance so they can lead us back to the banquet we ourselves prepared before the music ever started. To translate the celestial memory of our continuity into the tangible fabric of a Tuesday afternoon is to perform the ultimate act of existential alchemy. The first and most vital real-world implication of recognizing death as a chosen memory is the eradication of the scarcity of time paradox. In the matrix of the unremembered, we are driven by a frantic underlying panic, the bucket list mentality that assumes we must consume every experience now because the void is coming to erase our ledger. When we integrate the memory of our eternal nature, the quality of our presence shifts from frantic to flavorful. We realize that we are not in a race against the ticking clock, but in a deliberate immersion within a specific sensory curriculum. Practically, this means we stop rushing through the middle of our lives to get to some imagined finish line of success. We begin to treat every conversation, every meal, and every quiet walk as a precious, high-definition data point that we specifically came here to collect. The pressure to achieve is replaced by the permission to perceive. A second practical integration is the transformation of grief into a sacred intermission. For the unremembered, the death of a loved one is a jagged, final snapping of a thread. It is a biological tragedy with no recourse. However, when we hold the memory that our origin and destination are a shared, familiar shore, the nature of our mourning changes. We do not stop feeling the ache of the physical absence, for the heavy suit of the body is designed to feel that weight. But the grief loses its poison of hopelessness. We begin to view the departure of others as an actor watching a co-star finish their scenes earlier in the evening. We weep for the loss of their company in the current act, but we maintain a quiet, internal knowing that they have simply moved to the backstage where we will eventually join them. This perspective allows for a functional continuity of love, where we can continue to communicate with the essence of those who have passed, not as ghosts, but as fellow travelers who have simply put down their luggage. Furthermore, we must address the sovereignty of risk and creative courage. Most of human fear is rooted in the survival program, the biological imperative to protect the vessel at all costs because the vessel is seen as the self. When we integrate the memory of our indestructible origin, our relationship with failure and danger is radically remapped. We become the fearless protagonist of our own story. If the end is a known, safe, and curated destination, then the risks we take in business, in art, and in vulnerability lose their life-threatening edge. We are more likely to speak our truth, to launch the unconventional project, or to love without a safety net, because we realize that the worst-case scenario is merely an earlier return to a place of absolute belonging. Practical integration is the realization that you cannot ruin your life, because the life itself is a temporary exploration, and the results are measured in the depth of the experience, not the preservation of the form. Another profound real-world implication is the cultivation of relational presence. When we forget that we are eternal, we often treat other people as utilities or obstacles in our pursuit of survival. But when we remember the parable of the forgotten script, we begin to look at the people in our lives, especially the difficult ones, with a sense of archetypal recognition. We see the antagonist in our workplace not as a random enemy, but as a fellow soul who may have agreed, in the wings of the great theater, to play a challenging role for our own growth. This shift in perspective creates a natural, effortless compassion. We stop taking the drama so personally. We are able to maintain a level of internal stillness, even in the midst of conflict, because we are aware of the silent, smiling director that resides in both ourselves and the other person. Relational presence becomes an act of acknowledging the secret in everyone we meet. Finally, we encounter the duty of the luminous exit. Integrating the memory of death allows us to approach our own aging and eventual transition with a level of agency and grace that is almost entirely absent from modern medicine and psychology. Instead of being dragged toward the threshold in a state of terror and resistance, we can begin to practice the art of the unfolding. We can engage in conscious dying, treating the final stage of life as the most important chapter of the book, the moment when the themes are tied together and the memory lock begins to naturally soften. In practical terms, this leads to a life that is tidied up as it goes. We leave fewer things unsaid, fewer debts unpaid, and fewer shadows unexamined. We live in a state of constant readiness, not out of fear, but out of a desire to make the eventual return to the library as elegant and satisfying as possible. These practical integrations transform the secret of death from a metaphysical curiosity into a high-performance operating system for human life. By eradicating time anxiety, transforming grief, fueling creative courage, deepening relational presence, and preparing for a luminous exit, you become a master of the game. You are no longer a victim of the biological matrix, but a conscious participant in a cosmic adventure. You realize that the memory you chose to forget was the most precious tool you ever possessed, and by reclaiming it now, you can finally live with the unburdened joy of someone who knows exactly where they are going and has never truly left where they came from. We have traversed the depths of the ocean, walked the halls of the celestial library, and stood in the wings of the grand theater, all to arrive at a truth that was never further than the beat of your own heart. The exploration of death as a memory you chose to forget is not an exercise in comforting the ego, but a radical restoration of your true identity. We have seen that the secret was merely a veil of velvet, a masterpiece of voluntary amnesia designed to give the human experience its grit, its heat, and its profound, heartbreaking beauty. To conclude this journey is to realize that the threshold you once feared as an ending is actually the final activation point of your terrestrial curriculum. The mystery has been solved not by discovery, but by recovery. You are not a traveler lost in the dark. You are the light itself. Momentarily disguised as a seeker, so that the joy of homecoming could be felt with a renewed and startling intensity. The transformational call of this realization is an invitation to live from the end. This is the practice of perspective remembrance, where you inhabit the current moment with the grace and detachment of someone who has already seen the final pages of the book. It is a summons to drop the heavy armor of survival and step into the luminous vulnerability of the soul. When you know that the exit is a curated, sacred, and familiar door, you are finally free to commit yourself fully to the entry. The call is to love without the poison of finality, to create without the fear of erasure, and to act with the boldness of an immortal being playing in a temporary garden. You are being asked to be the conscious dreamer, the one who participates in the drama of the world with total passion, while never losing the quiet inner smile that comes from knowing the alarm clock is set for a time of absolute peace. This perspective demands a radical shift in our collective values. If death is a homecoming, then our current obsession with preserving the suit at the expense of nourishing the diver is revealed as a profound misunderstanding. We are called to rebuild our cultures on the foundation of existential continuity. This means honoring the cycles of life and death as the inhalation and exhalation of the divine. It means teaching our children that they are eternal architects of experience and treating our elders as those who are closest to the grand remembering. The transformation begins with the individual. As you reclaim the memory of your origin, you become a frequency broadcaster of peace. Your lack of fear becomes a permission slip for others to put down their own burdens. You become a living bridge between the world of shadows and the world of light, demonstrating through the sheer quality of your presence that the secret is out and the light is winning. The transformational call is ultimately a call to unconditional gratitude. Once the fear of the end is removed, all that remains is a profound appreciation for the memory lock itself. You can finally thank the amnesia for allowing you to feel the exquisite ache of a goodbye, the terrifying thrill of a new beginning, and the solid, heavy reality of the physical world. You realize that the forgetfulness was the greatest gift you ever gave yourself, for it made the remembering possible. Every challenge you have faced, every tear you have shed, and every shadow you have encountered was a deliberate choice made by an infinite version of you who knew that the pearl of awareness was worth the journey into the deep. You are the alchemist who has successfully turned the lead of mortal fear into the gold of eternal presence. As you step away from this narrative and back into the vivid, noisy, and beautiful world of your life, carry the liturgy of the return in your marrow. Do not wait for the final breath to remember who you are. Wake up now. Look at the people in your life and see the fellow actors. Look at the risks before you and see the scenery. Look at the ticking clock and see the rhythm of a song that never ends. The memory is no longer a secret. It is a warm, glowing coal at the center of your being, lighting the way through the theater of time. You have closed the book of fear and opened the book of remembrance. The shore is waiting, the light is steady, and you have never, for a single moment, been anything less than home.